Sometimes we might have the best of intentions, but still, we might end up doing the most evilest of actions. And so, the purest of intentions just don't matter. Especially when the god of a world causes an apocalypse where everyone dies. This is the story of Entity 404. Billions of years ago, back when the Minecraft universe was just being created, new dimensions were being formed daily, and so new gods, or spirits as they were known, were also being born. And these spirits only had two objectives that they had to fulfill. And those were, they had to protect the civilizations of their world, and second, they had to keep their world safe from external destruction. That's it. And so it was on one day, billions of years ago, that the 404th world was created. And along with that, Spirit 404 was also created. But at that time, World 404 was mostly just empty. And so Spirit 404 had quite some work to do, as he had to create his entire world and begin civilizations before he could even start fulfilling on his goals. And so over the course of the next billion years, he would do just that, as he would create vast cave networks underground, flood giant plains to create oceans, and allow sunlight to shine over the world to allow for plants to start growing. Finally, after all of that, the first very primitive forms of civilizations would begin to emerge. Now, these first civilizations weren't exactly the smartest, as it took them tens of millions of years before realizing that they could farm crops in one place, and that they wouldn't have to be constantly moving around all the time, scavenging for leftover food sources. But regardless of that, they were still progressing, just very slowly. And as they evolved over time, Spirit 404 ensured that they weren't going to be dying out, and so he stopped much suffering and disasters from occurring within his world. But after doing that for hundreds of millions of years, he was starting to get slightly annoyed just how slow they were with learning new things. And so he decided on one day to speed things up a bit and give his civilizations a lethal yet needed learning experience. And that learning experience was the discovery of fire. And so to do that, Spirit 404 started the first ever thunderstorm all across his world. And so now, with thunder striking down onto the world, trees began to ignite into flames as thunderbolts struck them. The civilizations were terrified, and many believed that this was their end, as they had never seen lightning before, and they had no idea what this fire was, and so many thought that this was a sign of the sky falling in on itself, and the world was collapsing. And so many began fleeing into large cave networks, hoping for safety and shivering in fear. Now, that wasn't exactly what he hoped would happen, but he had an idea to fix all of this. And that idea was to possess a pig. And then, in the form of the pig, he ran into the caves where all the civilizations were, making sure that they could see this pig, before striking the pig down with lightning, which lit it on fire and killed it from the burns. And all that was left behind from that pig was cooked pork chops, as the fire had cooked him alive. Now at first, all the people stared blankly at this pork chop, but ultimately they just stayed away from it, as they didn't know what this mysterious thing was. They had never seen a cooked pork chop before. But after some time, one brave creature stood forward and bravely decided to try eating it. And what happened to him? Well, he realized that this cooked meat was one of the most nutritious foods that he had ever eaten, and he got a burst of energy unlike ever before. All the other members of his civilization watched in awe and were amazed by this fired food thing. And so it was at that moment that they learned that by putting food into this mysterious fire, the result will be much better food that also tastes nicer. And so it was over the next few years that this technique of using fire in food evolved and spread rapidly, as All civilizations across the world now use fire in their cooking, and some even discovered campfires to cook food even more efficiently. And then later on, using these same fires that were used to cook, they discovered how to smelt ores, which helped them create new tools which allowed them to get even more food in a quicker time. It was amazing, as now they didn't have to worry about getting food all the time, and so now they could pursue other issues, such as making better housing or forging new armor. However, these grand achievements of World 404 might have just been luck, not skill of the spirit secretly showing them about a pig being cooked. As in the nearby world of 403, the spirit there had attempted to teach his people the exact same lesson in the exact same way, but he had very different results. As when they first heard the lightning strikes, their people did not run away in fear. Instead, they saw this new fire as a tool for mass destruction that they could use on each other to gain control over each other. And whilst in those next 1,000 years, World 404 was prospering, using fire to their advantage and evolving, World 403 was suffering, as people were being burnt to death and all the crops were being burnt too, which led to mass starvation. And every single attempt that Spirit 403 made to try and reverse this effect would only make the suffering worse. For example, when he tried to show his people that they could cook the animals to get better food, his people didn't see it as a sign for better food, but instead a sign that they needed to burn every single animal, which led to even more starvation. And so the civilizations of World 403 were collapsing rapidly, and the spirit couldn't do anything to stop that. And so it looked as if at that time that very soon World 403 was going to die, as the spirit was getting weaker and weaker and the world was continuing to suffer. But luckily that all changed on one summer morning, as the Great Spirit 404 saw the suffering of his nearby world and offered his help. Spirit 403 saw no way of fixing this by himself, and so obviously he agreed. And so it was on that morning that Spirit 404 arrived in World 403, ready to help his neighbour. However, there was a problem with this, as there cannot be two spirits in one world, as the world began to shake and it became clear that destruction was imminent. The power of the spirits was too much. Spirit 403 yelled out to Spirit 404,
"Listen, I failed my world, but I wanted to live on and be prosperous like your world. And so I'm here to offer the ultimate sacrifice of my life force to you, so that you can become the ruler of my world, as I just know that you'll do a better job at governing this place than I ever could. Will you please accept my offer?"
At first, Spirit 403 was hesitant, as he didn't know at that time if he could maintain the responsibilities of two worlds. But after seeing that billions of lives were at stake, and that if he did nothing, they would all die, he knew he had to agree. And so Spirit 403's life force was fused into Spirit 404. Power instantly began surging through him as World 403 started to fuse with World 404. He was now as powerful as both spirits combined, which meant that he could do anything imaginable very easily without facing any consequences. And so instantly he began to fulfill on the mission that Spirit 403 had failed with, and began to help its civilizations in a way that wasn't self-destructive. And his methods of helping were successful, as the burning of animals stopped, the fire rituals stopped, the burning of crops stopped, and so quickly the civilization of World 403 had stabilized. And then, once that happened, the civilization from World 403 and World 404 began to unite together in one giant civilization, which now meant that this new civilization, with the combined brainpower and strengths from both groups, more progress than ever before was being made in the world. And so life began to improve constantly and rapidly for everyone. while this was all happening, Spirit 404 looked over from the skies at his new civilization, and was just happy to see that he was able to help so many so easily. And so it was over the next 100 million years that his civilization began to grow rapidly. In fact, just a few hundred million years later, World 404 at that time had become one of the largest and most technologically advanced civilizations of the entire Minecraft universe. And it was only slightly behind the great original overworld. And so life continued to be great, as many new advancements were discovered within this world, which made life better and better for everyone. However, quickly, this pace of growth and prosperity would change, as it was later that century that Spirit 404's other neighbour, World 405, was now struggling, and struggling it was greatly, as the spirit there had made some very foolish decisions about limiting rainfall on his world, which put his world on a rapid decline, as now every single crop that was natural in that world was now dead. And so the world was declining very quickly, as the civilizations were dying very quickly. And this was happening so quick that it looked as if the world was going to explode any second, as the spirit was getting very close to death, as his health was tied to the health of his civilization. And so Spirit 404 made an impromptu visit to World 405 and offered his help.
Listen, your world will die very soon, and there is nothing that you can do to stop that, as it's just far too late now. But there is a solution that could save your world, and that is by committing your life force to me. And if you can do that, I promise I will save the world from the destruction that you have caused.
Spirit 405 agreed to this sacrifice, as he did not want the billions of lives that were remaining in this world to all be killed. He wanted them to be saved, and he didn't feel that he personally would be able to save them. And so he, just like Spirit 403 earlier, began to fuse into Spirit 404, and their worlds combined. Spirit 404 felt another surge of power, as he was now as strong as 3 spirits combined, and was now in charge of 3 worlds worth of civilizations. And so, just as he did with the civilizations from World 403, he began to integrate the civilizations from World 405 into his own civilization. And it was a success, as they all began working together, helping each other achieve their goals. And so the largest civilization ever known began to form. Another few million years passed, and now his civilization was greater than any other that had ever existed. And it was the largest by quite some margin too, having well over 10 trillion inhabitants. And so because of that, Spirit 404 became the most powerful spirit in all of existence. Life was great for everyone, as innovation was rapid and intense, and nothing was going to stop Spirit 404's reign of prosperity and peace in his world. Well, that's what they all thought, until one day. It was just an ordinary day in the winter, and Spirit 404 was just taking a walk through a birch forest to see what new technology his civilizations had made today, when suddenly the sky turned black and the world began to shake. This was wrong. Only he could do this, and so he looked around to see if this new technology they'd made was causing this, but no, it wasn't. Their technology wasn't advanced enough to cause this yet. So how was this all happening? He was thinking and began being very concerned when suddenly many spirits just started to appear. But not just any spirits, the great 3 spirits. The Nether, the Overworld, and the End Spirits. The spirits that held the other largest civilizations. Spirit 404 was now even more confused, as there was no reason for them to be here. But then they began to speak, and it became clear why they were here.
Your world is just too successful. That may not seem like a bad thing, Spirit 404, but it is.
You see, the sheer amount of power that you have in just that one world has sent a ripple effect across the entire Minecraft universe, and that effect has caused mass suffering in many other worlds. We know you only meant good by uniting these worlds, saving them from their destruction, but they were never doomed to be destroyed. They were only doomed to be set back a few million years.
And so we all came here today to say that you, Spirit 404, need to separate your worlds, or else more of this ripple will be felt across the world, and trillions more will suffer.
Spirit 404 was confused, as why were they only just coming now? He had been the greatest for quite some time now, and so, because of that, he didn't believe in this supposed ripple effect, and he thought that they were all lying, and so he responded,
No! I've spent over 1 billion years making this place what it is, and so I refuse to give it up. Well, you know that I, the Spirit of the Overworld, have the only world that is physically possible to contain a certain amount of power. And you, Spirit 404, have exceeded that amount by almost double, and so it is with much regret that I must say you have left me with no choice but to destroy your world, as no being shall ever be allowed to be greater than me.
And so the Nether Spirit, the Overworld Spirit, and the End Spirit all began shooting beams of energy at Spirit 404. He was going to try fighting back, but before he could, he blacked out, as the combined strength of these three spirits was far too much to fight against. When he finally woke up. But he was different now, as he was colourless. He knew what this meant. It meant his world had been destroyed, and everyone was dead, as the lack of colour meant a lack of population. This meant he was no longer a spirit, rather just an entity. He was angry, furious in fact, that those three spirits had just wiped away the civilization they had spent so long caring for. And so he tried using some of his powers to teleport back to his world, but he couldn't sense where his world was. They truly had destroyed it. And so then he tried using some of his powers to teleport to the spirits that had done this, to order them to revert all these changes. And he was able to teleport right into the overworld, but he blacked out straight away. Another few days passed, and when he woke up, he realized at that moment that he wasn't even a fraction of what he was once as a spirit. Instead, he was a much weaker entity that couldn't even teleport correctly. But even in this much weaker form, he still believed that there was a chance that he could get revenge for all of this. But to do that, he's going to need to find a way of manipulating someone or something with power to get that revenge. But for now, he needed to conceal his identity, as any being worthy of manipulation for his revenge would likely recognize that he was a spirit, and thus they may be less inclined to stay for his lies and manipulation. And so, seeing as there were several black and red sheep right next to him, he ran over to them and killed them to make a robe out of their wool to conceal his identity. And so that's how he became the entity 404. And so now, with his identity concealed, he began with his plan of revenge. And so his first step was using the very limited powers he had to cast a spell where he would freeze time for the next 10 hours. His plan was that during these next 10 hours, he would find a demi-spirit, which was a creation that the overworld spirit might have made, and that was who he was going to try and manipulate and lie to. And so, whilst everything was frozen, he called out to all the demi-spirits within the world, and he could sense that they could hear him. Yes, this was going to work. He just had to hope that they'll come to him within the next 10 hours. And so, to find out if this plan actually succeeds, you'll need to watch this video.